Okay, so I will share this with you today. This is the active voice for business communication. And where is it? It's right here. Okay. Okay, so when we talk about active voice, right, in business, again, active voice for business communication is the voice that we want to use in business. This is really important. We're not looking to use a passive voice in business. We need to have a voice that is direct. We need to have a voice. And when I say voice, please also take in consideration that it's not just talking, but also writing. It's very similar in both cases. But the best bet for you to understand what this is to have exercises or understand how to prepare and practice talking in active voice versus passive. So one word that's really important for you to remember is you need to be direct when you're talking. And I'll explain that to you very quickly what direct means, and you'll see this as we go along. Is sometimes being direct means to get to the point as quickly as possible. And this I see very often when students write cover letters for employment or write letters in general. They will not get to the point right away. They will say certain things they might talk about, and then at the end of the paragraph in the cover letter, they'll mention why they're writing the cover letter or why they're writing. It's the same thing in talking. A lot of students do that too. They in business or in general they like to tell stories, right? And this is called anecdotal writing or narrative writing, where you go on and on about a subject, but you're not getting to the point. But in business writing, you need to get to the point as quickly as possible, and you also have to use what we call active voice and active verbs, right? So you need to be direct, concise, and also the subject does action described by the verb. So as simple as that, we might say, well, all verbs will describe the action. Not necessarily. And we'll get to that in a couple of slides, and you'll see what I mean by that. Right, so what are the advantages of active voice? Readers know who is doing what to whom, and as simple as that means, right? Sometimes the way we write or certain people write, it's the opposite. And when that happens, it's not clear about what is happening in that particular instance. Again, if you have questions, you can let me know, but if you can hold on, I do have a lot of slides or a lot of exercises or a lot of examples to show you to get a better picture of what I'm trying to say. Also, now, advantages of active voice, there's no questions or less questions. What that means is that it's clearer. So certainly when you're talking to someone and you have a discussion with someone in business, there's less back and forth questions. And believe it or not, questions are good. I've always stressed that. But in business sometimes, to save time and to get things going, you really want to avoid as many questions about something like a question that will say, oh, it's not clear, can you repeat? Or something like that. And in business, and especially in meetings or with customers, this causes a lot of anxiety and causes a lot of stress because the messages are not getting back and forth or not being clear. Also, second guessing is eliminated. That means that what is being said is that you have to guess of what it is instead of having it to be very clear as it says there. So yeah, second guessing can be eliminated in using the active voice. All right. Now, certainly we can't use the active voice in business 100% of the time. I'll be wrong in stating that. And you can't use the active voice 100% of the time in your lives in general. But there is many reasons why you will not use the active voice. I just want to give you an example. So, when not to use the active voice, certainly if you have bad news to relay, right? If you do want to give bad news, even in business, sometimes, especially to customers, you want to keep the bad news till the end, and or try to avoid being direct in giving bad news. And no matter how you say it or how you do it, that's what you have to look at, is because you don't want to always, you want to deflect, I should say, a little bit the bad news. You still have to give the information and be clear, but you still have to deflect. So here's an example of bad news. If someone owes money, and it says, if payment is not received by May 1, then it should be May 1 by May 1, then the account will be frozen. So instead of telling that the account will be frozen first, right, you use the word conjunction of if payment is not received. So that is not the prime message. It's not direct. The message is that the account will be frozen. So if you want to be direct, you would actually switch that to the account will be frozen if payment is not received by May 1, right? So that would be active. This is passive. Another reason why you would use the active voice, unable to be completely specific. Here, in case there's an example, the decision was taken by the board. It should be by the board of directors. Well, a lot of mistakes here. Let me fix that. Sort of embarrassed there. I had changed things around, and now I look at it, and it should read like that, and this should be like this. Whoops, what am I doing? Let me see. Let me look ahead in case I have some other. Okay, so admit. So unable to be completely specific, the decision was taken by the board of directors. So instead of saying the board of the directors took or made a decision or took the decision, you're basically deflecting it, and you're saying the decision was taken by the board of directors. So this is also the passive voice. So I prefer to emphasize what is done rather than who is doing it. So that's a big difference. All right, so I'll give you some examples now what we're talking about when we're talking about passive versus active voice. So here's a sentence. The queen, where are we? Yeah. The queen was eating a jam sandwich, right? So the queen was eating a jam sandwich. Here, can you tell me what the subject is in this sentence? What is the subject in this sentence? A sentence has excuse me. One second. Yes, absolutely, right? The queen is the subject in this sentence, right? So the queen was eating a jam sandwich. The queen is the subject of this sentence. Let's keep going. So the queen was eating a jam sandwich. What is the verb in this sentence? Eating? Anybody else? What is the verb in this sentence? Was eating, right? The queen was eating a jam sandwich. The verb in this sentence is was eating. So this is an active sentence. The subject, the queen, is actively biting her into her jam sandwich, right? So the queen here was eating a jam sandwich. So, but we could change this sentence around, right? And make it something else. So here we go. The jam sandwich was being eaten by the queen, right? So now in this sentence, it's still a good sentence, right? What is the subject in this sentence? It's the jam sandwich, right? So the jam sandwich was being eaten by the queen. So let's keep going. So the jam sandwich was eaten by the queen. What is the verb in this sentence? Was being eaten is the verb in this sentence. So now this is certainly passive voice. The subject, jam sandwich, is passively having something done to it. It is being eaten, right? So this is a passive sentence, right? So this might sound complicated, right? But everybody does this all the time. We always use passive sentences. So let's take an example, or I'll give you some examples, or you tell me what these sentences are. Are they passive or are they active? Here we go. Is this sentence active or passive? Mark was eating an apple. Active or passive? This is an active sentence, right? Mark is actively eating the apple. The apple is not eating Mark or being eaten by Mark, right? So it's actively done by Mark. He's eating the apple. Here's another one. The picture was painted by Tom. Is this sentence active or passive? This is passive, right? The subject of the sentence is the picture. The picture is having something passively done to it. Okay? Let's keep going. The man wore a gray hat. Active, right? So the subject is man and the verb is wore. So this is an active sentence. Okay? When the subject of the sentence is doing something, the verb is active. So now let's flip that around. The gray hat was worn by the man. Right? So this is a passive sentence. Here, when the object of the sentence is having something done to it, the verb is passive. So the verb was worn is a passive sentence. So far, so good? Let's keep going. This one. This sentence, is it active or passive? The girl fed the horse. This is active verb, right? Fed is an active verb. Which is this? The pencil was held by the baby. Passive, right? It is passive verb. The was held is a passive verb. All right, so now let's do a little exercise in changing it around. So change the sentence to the active verb. The ball was balanced on the seal's nose. So make this into active. Absolutely, right? The seal balanced the ball on his nose. Now, as simple as this is, right? What I'm showing you about passive and active verb, talking or language or writing or verbs, a lot of people don't do this. It's something, I don't know what it is. Sometimes it's because they're afraid to get to the point right away and they diffuse it and passively make the sentence, write the sentence passively instead of being active, right? So now you need to remember a verb is active when the subject is doing it. A verb is passive when the object is having something done to it. So in business English, the sentence should be, most of the time, like I said, in the active voice. Okay, so far so good. All right, we're doing good. So verbs and voices, let's take a look at that. So voice is the form a verb takes to indicate whether the subject of the verb performs or receives the action, right? There are two types of voice. Again, active voice and passive voice. Okay? So let's keep going. So I know this is going to be repetitive, but this is the best way to learn, I find, is when I do repeat information a different way. So this is para. Right? So the active voice, again, is used to show that the subject of the sentence is performing or causing the action. So example, John threw the basketball before the buzzer. John shot the basketball from the free throw line, and John scored 3 points. This is all active. Now let's reverse these sentences and make them passive. So passive voice, as we said, is used when the subject is the recipient of the action. So now the ball was thrown by John. The basket was shot by John, and the score was made by John. So this is all passive voice, as you can see. So why this really matters, right? Like I mentioned at the beginning, like I said, repeating is really good at this in this level. Why does it matter? Because the active voice is more direct and concise. Passive voice is indirect and sometimes wordy. Wordy means that you're using the word, too many words to say what you could say in the active voice, and you can be more concise and direct, right? So again, I repeat, when would you want to use a passive voice? Well, when intentionally trying to hide the subject of the sentence, right? So the mistake was made by someone. So this sentence, you're hiding the subject and helps him or her hide the blame. This mistake is at the beginning was made by someone. Instead of saying that someone made the mistake was made by someone. So you are deflecting and you are hiding the information behind the object. So the object here really is not the subject, it's the object. Okay? So when intentionally trying to minimize the guilt of the subject, you can say cheating was committed by me, right? So me should be the subject, but here it's not, right? It's completely switched over. Okay, so when passive voice better emphasizes the main point of the message, such as children were harmed by the drunk driver, right? So here again, you're basically switching it over, but this case, right now, when passive voice better emphasizes the main point, really the children is the object because they were harmed by the truck driver, right? But in this case, it's more important to use the passive voice not to deflect, but to give emphasis on the object in this case, okay? But like I said, when we talk about indirect and in business, we certainly don't want to emphasize the object. But there are certain cases that you'll have to. Okay? So, let's keep going. Again, I might be repeating myself, but there's a lot of information here that I want to share. So the passive voice requires a double verb and will always consist of a form of the verb to be and the past participle, usually the N or ED or T form of another verb. All right? So here's an example. The active voice, John baked the bread. So baked stands alone. It's not a double verb. But passive voice, the bread was baked. Here we have the to be by John. So was is a form of the verb to be. So always or most of the time in the English language, when you use a passive voice, you're always using the verb to be. To use the verb to be, you're always talking in the passive voice. So when you see the words is, was, here again, was is a form of the verb to be. This is a passive sentence, right? Was is a form of the verb to be. Okay, so far so good. If I'm going too fast, please let me know. But like I said, I did this presentation repetitively, so we're going back certain points, and you'll have a better understanding of what this is or how to use it. So, form of passive voice verbs. Writers should be familiar with the forms to be, often called, these are terminologies that you're going to see often. These are called linking verbs, right? So that they easily identify the passive voice in their work. So here are a few of the linking verbs. Am, is, are, was, were, be, being, and been. These are all linking verbs and they're all passive verbs, okay? So here are some more examples, right? The forms of to be in the examples, the verb to kick in various forms of the passive verb, right? Is kicked, had been kicked. Was kicked, is going to be kicked. These are all passive. Is being kicked, will be kicked. Has been kicked, can be kicked. Was being kicked, should be kicked, right? So these are all forms of passive verbs. So some more here. So the form of passive verbs, the cookies were eaten by the children. So now if you want to make this active, you change the subject and the object places, and the children becomes the subject and they ate the cookies, right? And another example, passive, the tunnels are dug by the gophers, and you want to make this into active. The gophers dug the tunnel. So you can see the verbs to be here. So you eliminate that, switch the subject and the object, and you get a sentence that becomes clearer and precise, concise, as you can see when it comes to language. Okay, so far so good. So let's practice. All right. So label the following sentences active or passive. Louise made the chocolate cake. Is that active or passive? That is an active for sure sentence. The chocolate cake was made by Louise. That is passive. The package was advertised by the travel agent. That is passive. The travel agent advertised the package. That's active. The chain was broken by my brother. Passive. My brother broke the chain on my bike. I hemmed the prom dress. The prom dress was hemmed by me. The pencil on the floor was broken by him. Passive, right? He broke the pencil on the floor. Active. Fantastic. So let's try something else. Here, let's change the sentence below to the active voice. First one, the statue is being visited by hundreds of tourists every year. Make that into active. Hundreds of tourists visit the statue every year. Okay. One more way you can do that also active. There are at least three ways you can rewrite this sentence into active. No? Well, I want you to stay in the same tense and use the same words, right? So the first one was given to us was hundreds of visitors visit the statue every year. So say that in a different way. Every year, right? So that's one way. So I'll give you another one, then after that you'll see what I'm trying to get at. So here's another way. hundreds of tourists every year visited the statue. Right? Every year now comes right after tourists. So now we have two ways. Hundreds of tourists visit the statue every year. Hundreds of tourists every year visited the statue. There's one more way. Yes, what is the difference? Why is every year movable? This is called adverbial phrase or adverbial clause right here. This really is movable. When something is movable in a sentence and it's still clear, it becomes adverbial. This is an adverb, which really is defining or changing visited. Visited every year. This goes hand in hand. So every year is adverbial. That means you could move it in the sentence and it's still clear. Or you could take it off completely. Let's say we take it off completely, right? Hundreds of tourists visit the statue. Is it clear? It's not clear, right? Every year needs to be there. So here we go. Hundreds of tourists every year visit the statue. Right? So this is movable, but this is really adverbial and in the sentence. You can move it 2-3 places. Okay, let's move to the next one. I can give you a whole lesson on adverbial phrases and clauses, but we're not going to get into that. So my books were stolen by someone yesterday. So now change that into the active voice. Someone stole my books yesterday, right? But let's say now, yesterday is the same thing as every year. You can take this away. Now make it, someone stole my books. Is it still a good sentence? Yes. Is it still active? Yes. So this is an adverb that is defining stolen, right? You can take this away. So you could say, yesterday someone stole my books, someone yesterday stole my books, or someone stole my books yesterday. So all of this is correct. This is adverb. Okay? So here's another one. These books had been left in the classroom by a careless student. Make that active voice. Tougher one. How would you make that into active? Yes, left, right? A careless student left these books in the classroom. Okay? So it's not had been, it's left. Here's another one. Coffee is raised in many parts of Hawaii by plantation workers. Make that into active. Yes, right? Plantation workers raised coffee in many parts of Hawaii. So here's the last one. The house had been broken into by someone while the owners were on vacation. Not had, right? Someone broke, right? Someone broke into the house while the owners were on vacation. Now here again, this is adverbial. So you can put this at the beginning, right? So if we go, this is adverbial. So we can say, while the owners were on vacation, someone broke into the house, right? So someone still remains as the subject, but this is adverbial. It's in the front of the sentence. Okay, so you could move this around or you can take it out, right? In many cases, the sentence will still be clear. Okay, so, yeah. Well, someone had broken into the house. It still becomes, it's not clear. Someone broke into is the verb. You can use had broken, but even to be even clearer, right? Someone broke into the house while the owners were on vacation. It's very clear now that what's happening here is that someone broke into the house. We know it's past tense, right? By putting the word someone had broken, again, you're deflecting it and it's not very clear. Someone broke into the house while the owners were on vacation makes it completely active. Okay? You do want to eliminate and you want to make the verb as clear as possible because verbs always have actions. This is why they're called action verbs, active, action. This is why you need to have a clear verb to define if it's active or if it's passive. Okay? I'm just going to stop sharing for 1 minute. Let me reshare. So let's keep going in the same subject. So what are active and passive voices? Active and passive voices refers to whether the subject or the object in the sentence performs the action of the verb. So in active voice, the subject performs the action of the verb. In passive voice, the object performs the action of the verb. All right, so here's another example. Active voice, the subject performs the action of the verb. The student is the subject. Presented is the action. And talk is the object. The student presented the talk, right? So, and here's another example. The article summarized the research. Subject, article. Action, summarized, right? The research is the object. Now let's switch it to passive, right? Now the object performs the action of the verb, right? Or performs the action of the verb. So the talk was presented by the student. Here we have flipped, and now student was the subject, has become the object. Talk is really the object, but it was flipped and it's now become the subject. As you can see, was lets you know that this really is an object, part of the verb, part of the sentence, and not the subject. Okay, so here's another one. Reverse this one also. The research was summarized by the article. Here we have the to be, right? And the article, which was the subject, now has become the object. It has flipped over, right? So again, just to give you more information, how do these two voices differ? The examples that we just shown you are the same in terms of what actually happens. Yes, it's the same thing. In both cases, the student did the presenting. In both cases, the article did the summarizing. So why are we going to bother by using one or the other? Why do we have to differentiate active versus passive? Well, as I mentioned right at the beginning, active voice is direct. The subject directly acts on the object. The tone is clear and immediate. And as if you throw a ball directly at a target, the target gets all the force of the ball, let's say. So this is really straightforward. On the other side, if we use passive voice, right, the subject is acted on by the object. And the tone is not clear. It's roundabout, right? As if you bounce a ball off a wall, they hit a target, the wall and the target both get some of the force of the ball. So the impact is not as clear or strong or as clear as using active, okay? So changing passive to active, here's an example again. Depression has been researched by scientists for decades, right? So now there is no reason to use the passive voice. It makes the sentence harder to follow, right? A preferred version uses active voice. Scientists, right, have researched depression for decades. So here, really, it's still deflective because he's still using have. You can actually eliminate the have, and you can say scientists researched depression for decades. You can actually remove that, right? So this is really something that you're looking at have done. You can use the have in this case, but it's still not clear. As an example here, you could actually remove that and make it even clearer, okay? So here's some more. Surveys were handed out to participants by research assistants, right? This sentence makes the research process sound rather mysterious, as it says. Surveys were handed out. So the surveys were handing out to the participants by research assistants. You're saying that the surveys were actually handing it out. This is what you're saying. So it's really not clear. So if you change it over and you say research assistants handed surveys out to the participants, here again, we just use a single verb and we know the action of this verb versus were handed, okay? And we know that it's the research assistants that were doing the handling. We're doing the handing out, okay? So this is passive and this is active. Let's keep going because I just want to show you one more thing about this. I'm getting to it in a minute. The active voice tells you what the subject of the sentence does. The passive voice creates a new subject, is exactly what it does. It doesn't create a new subject. It's more, in my estimation, it fakes. There's a fake subject. It makes one up. So it really doesn't create a new one. It's just a fake subject. It's not a true subject, right? So the active voice is more common than the passive voice and has to be clearer. And you can see that there's always less words being used when you use the active voice. Robin started a group project. Passive, the group project was started by Robin. So here again, it's deflective. Robin needs to be the subject, okay? There's another reason why a lot of people do use was, is, and use the verb to be. It's very simple. It's because it's easy, right? It's easy to go back to the first verb everybody learned in the English language, which was to be. As in French, say, same thing. So this is why a lot of people, when they talk, they don't know the verb to use or how to use the verb and the action verbs, and they switch and they go straight to the verb to be, right? So it takes a little bit more effort, for sure, it takes a little bit more effort to write in the active voice than in the passive voice, right? But the effort is really worth it when you have a sentence that is clear, especially if you're writing or talking to someone and it's an important time in your lives where you need to be clear at a specific time, okay? So politicians, if I may say, if you listen to politicians over and over again, you'll notice one thing. They will deflect everything. So politicians are not really businessmen, right? They're politicians. And politicians will always use the verb to be. So if you listen to, especially nowadays where we hear so many politicians, some good, some bad, some weird, and some very deflective in their manner, in how they approach what's happening to us today, you'll see that this situation that we're in today, most politicians will use the passive voice. Strange but true. But if you listen to scientists and people that have proof positive of things about our, what's happening if there is a vaccine or possibility, you will hear them talking more in the active voice. They are more to the point and direct. It's incredible, but it's true, right? I should have taped some examples, and maybe I will next time, just to give you some proof positive on how politicians don't get to the point right away. They'll talk forever, right? And before they get to the point. While scientists will get to the point right away, and their communication style really helps them to do that also. But that's how most people talk. In politics, you'll say to yourself, you'll listen to politics and you'll go, wait a minute, he didn't answer the question. I don't know if you ever said that to yourself, right? So when a newspaper reporter or a reporter asks a question to a politician, you see them on TV or listen to them on radio, you'll hear them not answer the question. They will reflect on something else, talk about something else, and then finally, maybe, possibly address the question or not. So by that time, it's totally deflective, and you don't even remember what the sentence or what the question was. This is done certainly on purpose in politics. But in science, it's the opposite. If you listen to them, you'll see that the answers that you're going to get from them are clear, right? So I want to introduce you to two more words besides active and passive, and in the English language, a little lesson further on, right? And that is transitive and intransitive verbs, right? So this is really something that in English language not many people talk about, or what are they and how are they being used, right? So only transitive verbs, verbs which take a direct object, they've got to take a direct object, can be made passive, right? So if you're not sure if a verb is transitive or intransitive in English, try putting an object after it, right? So I'll give you an example. I know I'm going far here, but I will certainly get this information to you on video, so you'll have it and you can go back and reflect on what is being said. So here we go. A transitive verb, right, needs to have, like I said here, right, only transitive verbs take direct object, can be made passive. If it doesn't have a direct object, automatically they're intransitive, right? So here, let's give you an example. Transitive: subject, Robin; verb, started; object, direct object, the group project. What did Robin start? Answer: the group project. The verb start can take an object, so this verb, right, is transitive. It's called a verb that is transitive. It needs, you can't just, let's say if you take this off, right, Robin started. Is that a complete sentence? No, that's a phrase, right? Robin started what? So this is not, this automatically you know that this is transitive, because Robin, the verb, needs a direct object, right? You can say Robin started the class, Robin started to run, right? But that is something that you have to add for it to be transitive. I'll give you an example of intransitive. Robin laughed, right? Is that a clear sentence? Yes. Does it need an object? No, right? So what did Robin laugh? Nothing. You cannot laugh something, right? You can't. So the verb laugh cannot take an object, so this is intransitive, right? Robin laughed. Okay? So let's keep going. Here are some verbs are transitive and intransitive. That's true, right? I ran the race, transitive. I ran, intransitive. Are they both complete sentences? Yes, right? So if you want to know for sure if a verb is transitive or intransitive, look in the dictionary of English. Absolutely, that's true. You can do that. It should tell you if it's trans or intrans, right? Here I'll give you some more information. The object of the active sentence becomes the subject of the passive sentence, right? Robin started the group project, object. So now we switch it, right? The group, and we switch it from the verb. Subject was started. The verb really is a group project by Robin. So the action is here, okay? So now you tell me what these sentences are, right? Active sentence, how do people create ketchup, right? People create ketchup from tomatoes. Or passive, how is ketchup created? By people, right? Ketchup is created, there it is, right? By people from tomatoes. This is a passive sentence. Here's a couple more. How do chefs make mayonnaise, right? Chefs make mayonnaise from oil and eggs. Passive, how is mayonnaise made by chefs? Mayonnaise is made by chefs from oil and eggs. So it's reversed. I'll give you a couple more, right? Where do farmers grow grapes? Farmers grow grapes in California. Passive, where are grapes grown? Grapes are grown by farmers in California, right? Great. So just to leave you off with this right here, we use the active voice in business English. The sales associate sold a car. Someone or something is the subject. Sold does something, the verb. This is action. And to someone or something else, direct the car, right? Here's one more example. The manager, subject, hired, verb, action, the new sales associate, okay? So now if you reverse this and make this into passive, here is passive. The car, right, someone or something, was sold by the sales associate, right? So this is really the passive voice. You can see it right here that we're using the verb to be. Here's another one, right? The new sales associate was hired by the manager, okay? And just some more examples for you. So spot the use of the active voice and the passive voice. So you let me know which one is passive and which ones are active. The music was played by the DJ. That's a passive voice. The sun was hidden by the clouds. That's also passive. Delighted fans streamed onto the pitch. This is active. Marie wrote the letter to the head teacher. And the last one, Danny was praised by the head teacher. This is passive or active? This is passive, and you can see that the answer is wrong here, right? This is a passive sentence. So this is not active. This is a passive sentence for passive voice. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop here for a minute, and I will send you an exercise for you to do about passive voice. So for the students that are in my Google Classroom, you're going to get that. Again, I apologize for some of the students. I gave you the Dr. LaRoche exercise a little bit late, right? So I will make sure that you'll get that today, right? And for the ones that are not in my class, I will send them to your teacher like I did last time, and you can have the actual link to this YouTube video, and you'll also get the exercise through them. But for now, I'm going to stop, and I'm going to take a little break. And when I come back, we're going to talk about the positive language, unless you have any questions now. Nope. Okay, great. So I will stop now. I will stop sharing, and I'm going to take a 5 or 10 minute break, stand up, get some water, and I will be right back.